folks, this is Dr. Geer, and this is Unit 5, Chapter 8 lecture on the subject of compensation. And I would say that this is going to be a relatively limited lecture in the sense that most of the items around compensation, as Rebor dealt with them in his book, dealt more from a central office or district office perspective rather than from a principal's perspective, which obviously is our focus mostly in this course. However, I will elaborate on certain points. As a principal, one item in terms of compensation that I would use as an overarching framework for your thinking around compensation is that there's a great deal of value placed by individuals on items that we wouldn't normally consider compensation. For instance, what is the culture environment of the building? If that's good, some people will view that as something of great value and in a sense is a form of compensation. I'm now going on to the next page, which is variables affecting compensation. I'd like to elaborate a bit on pay for performance. That has been an experiment which has been tried in several school districts, and generally it has been unsuccessful in its implementation in the school setting. And the reasons for that really come from about three different places. The first one is how do you measure the metrics which will kick in pay for performance? In other words, is it going to be just test scores? Is it going to be some other kind of index? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative in nature? So this whole measurement piece is problematic. As states go towards a more value-added assessment scheme where we measure students from the place they are when they come to the teacher in September to the place where they exit at the end of the school year, with the theory being that a good teacher will bring that student through 1 year of growth or more. That has some potential for measurement for the purposes of pay for performance. The next reason pay for performance has had its problems is the whole question of who decides who gets the pay and who doesn't. Oftentimes this has been the function of some committee. There is hesitancy to place a lot of this power that is associated with pay for performance in the hands of just administrators, in the sense that people fear that the favorite son or daughter will get compensation whereas others won't. Also, one of the issues around this is the Lake Wobegon effect. Everybody's above average, everybody gets pay for performance. The last issue around pay for performance is it has been shown to lead to falsification of testing when that was used as the metric to decide whether someone got a raise or not. That principals and teachers have actually altered test scores in order to qualify for these bonuses. The other issue that I'd like to just quickly point out is the whole idea around seniority, and just to have you think about the idea that you are rewarded for longevity and not performance, and the issues that that brings to the table. I'm going on to the next page. We're on page 3. Different types of compensation. Well, I began this lecture with some discussion around a term that economists call psychic income, and that is that people derive value from non-monetary items, such as the culture of the school, the family atmosphere it may convey, even how close one is to home in terms of commute. All can be valued and can be considered a form of indirect compensation. One of the things that I would challenge you as a principal is that you will not have a lot of discretion over being able to compensate people monetarily generally. So you have to become creative and figure different ways to compensate outstanding performance, such as recognitions at faculty meetings, things like nominations for awards. And believe it or not, people place great value on this. And I have seen this in both the Horry County and the Marion districts, or the Georgetown district, where they have the Teacher of the Year contest. And there's or Teacher of the Year award contest isn't really a good word for it, but there's a lot of prestige that goes with this particular award, and as a result of that, people feel, in a sense, compensated for their good work, even through the nomination process. Take a look at things like oftentimes television stations will have, awards for outstanding teachers, professional organizations, and so on. Another way to reward employees is actual career ladders that have been built. By that is a teacher takes on more leadership roles as a department chair, maybe chairs of committee, other forms of teacher leadership. I'm now moving on to page 4. One of the overarching ideas that I would push at you when it comes to compensation, and to consistently keep this in mind, is that it's very important that we as administrators do not mess with people's paychecks. I will say that again. You have to be very careful with people's paychecks, in the sense that oftentimes any mistake on them, any type of underpayment, or some type of problem will result in an undermining of the employee's perspective of your competence. So as such, make sure that when you are a building principal, that items that are being submitted for pay, albeit extra duties, mileage, whatever it is done in an effective way. One of the things that Rebor talks about, and I wanted to emphasize, is salary as motivation. In my 30 years in the field, it doesn't matter how much you pay someone, it is never enough, and that's just human nature. What really drives performance is intrinsic motivation of the person wanting to do a good job, the work ethic and pride that he or she takes in the work that they do each day. Don't get me wrong, salary certainly helps, but one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that there's a lot of research around this, and salary is not one of the major motivators in terms of the quality of someone's job performance. Rebor also discusses community wage data, and I just wanted to speak to that a little more specifically, in the sense that this is important, not so much from the principal's point of view directly, but however it does greatly influence the community's perspective on the district as a whole, and consequently a school building, its staff, the principal, in the sense that the compensation that the educators in a community get needs to be somewhat in line with the rest of the community. If the community views educators as overpaid, it undermines support for education and can create long-term problems. On to the next page. This is about salary schedule. One of the things that I would point out to you is that since South Carolina is not a collective bargaining state in terms of teacher unions, this is not necessarily an issue, but if any of you ever go into another state where there is collective bargaining, what happens with salary schedules is over time, as new contracts are negotiated, money may be pushed at the low end or the high end or the middle of a salary schedule, And over time, what happens is it gets skewed in various steps. For example, um, let's say that we were that that the salary was pushed at the higher end, more experienced educators on the salary schedule with the most experience. You could get huge jumps between, say, year 15 and year 16, where the percentage gain there may be 16%, whereas somebody who's in year 2 to year 3 may get as small as maybe a 5% increase from step to step. So the reason that I bring this up is occasionally if you become an HR person and there are salary schedules in your district, you need to take a look at those and make sure that over time various steps have not gotten out of whack compared to others. One of the things also I would suggest is that as HR folks, we want to extend the salary schedule as long as we can. So in other words, lots of steps so that a teacher goes from step to step to step so that they don't get to the top end of your pay scale quickly. One of the things I would mention is for you to pay attention to your base salary, and as an HR professional, are you competitive with your neighbors? You need to be able to attract quality candidates to your school district, so your base salary needs to reflect that. Now going on to page 6, payroll considerations. Overall, payroll can become a very complex operation based on all of the things that go into it beyond just a salary. You may have payroll deductions that Rebor lists in this PowerPoint. And I would say to you that the more deductions there are for various items, the more there's a likelihood for error. So one of the things as a payroll department, if you ever are part of that, you have to be very, very aware of that, and as well making sure that accuracy of the information coming from the sites is such that it's feeding the system in an accurate manner. One of the things that you do have some discretion over in terms of pay periods is that you want to stretch those out. In other words, you don't want every week pay periods, one, because of the short turnover time to get the payroll produced, but also you want to be sitting on those chunks of money that will go into payroll as long as you possibly can to accrue the interest into your general fund. I'm moving on to page 7 of the PowerPoint. A couple of things that I would suggest around compensation and recommendations to the board, if you ever get to that level, is try to be somewhere in the middle of the pack in terms of the way that your compensation packages look as compared and contrasted with your neighbors. And the other thing that I would say is that you have to become something of an amateur economist in this whole realm of payroll and consequently the budgeting procedures, because you have to keep an eye on the pulse of the economy. Is inflation breaking out? What are the costs going to happen? For instance, one of the things as a school leader, I'm sure that some superintendents are thinking about right now is how will the Gulf oil spill affect their district in the long term? Will the price of fuel oil go up? Will there be some form of taxation that occurs to help the cleanup? Those are the types of things that you keep an eye on to try and understand where you think the long-term health of the economy is going. And that is quite a challenge, believe me. We're headed on to the eighth slide on indirect compensation. One of the things that I did want to elaborate on here is there are some things in voluntary fringe benefits that I wanted to emphasize. For instance, the 403B plans, which are a form of tax sheltered annuity where employees can get some of their gross pay taken out to be put into investments, and this lowers their gross pay for taxation purposes and contributes to their retirement funding. So that's something that districts offer. There's been quite a few changes around the law, and now there are third-party administrative companies that deal with this. And if you are not using the 403B, I would suggest that you take a look and see if your district offers the option and begin one. There's insurance companies, you've all seen the Aflac commercials on television. This type of insurance is something that an employer can offer his or her employees without incurring any costs. The only thing that the employer does in this is to provide payroll deductions to fund the insurance for things like disability, accidents, long-term care, and it's a low-cost benefit for a district to offer to its employees. You may have flex spending accounts, putting aside X number of dollars every year so that you can pay for health care or child care. And again, this lowers your gross income, so you're not being taxed on the higher levels of gross income when it comes to paying your federal income tax. One of the newer items deals with health savings accounts, and I'm going to talk about that on the next page, which is on healthcare and related insurance. So I'm on page 9 now. Health insurance historically was a very cheap benefit for school districts, and it was used to attract staff. Obviously, as you are most likely aware of, this has changed significantly. For instance, for the school district where I was just superintendent, a family plan for a family medical insurance was somewhere in the neighborhood of between $10,000 to $12,000 per year. So depending on the contribution level of the employee, you can see this is a significant cost to a district to provide this benefit. And the scary thing around health insurance is that generally it's been increasing anywhere from 8 to 20% per year. So it is a significant cost to school districts. And in collective bargaining and negotiations, this is one of the places where districts have been really, really bargaining hard, is to increase the employee contribution rate to pay for health insurance. One of the schemes that has been brought forward, and this is a win-win in the healthcare situation, is the use of health savings accounts. How this works is that the basic premise is that some people will opt for lower cost plans. For instance, young people, oftentimes single or without a family, they don't use health insurance a whole lot compared with other age groups, people with young children. Some of us who are a little grayer than you, we use our health insurance more than young people. So what districts do is they offer a lower cost plan to this group of employees, and compared with the high cost plan, there is a savings. And what districts have done to sweeten this proposition is they'll set up a health savings account, kick in some of that savings, and then pocket some of the savings for the district itself. It's kind of a win-win, because what happens is contrary to like your flex spending account, the health savings account can accrue over time, and you can take this right into retirement. So if you contributed to a health savings plan account over time, you could have a large chunk of money by the time you go to retire that you can use to offset medical costs, buy medical insurance, and so on. On a final note, I would say that health insurers love educators. They like them for two reasons. One is we engage in less risky behaviors than the general population and have a tendency to take care of our health better than the general population. As a result, the health insurance costs of educators as a group are lower than the general population. This can have some advantages. One is if you are a big enough district, you could consider self-funding your health insurance. So in other words, you either set up an administrative wing of district office to administer your own health insurance, or you can even bring in a third-party administrator to do that. The other thing that this opens up is the idea of healthcare consortiums where different school districts may bond together so that there's a big pool of potential employees to fund the health insurance, and what you try to do is to get health insurance providers to compete for your business through that consortium of several districts. With that, that is the items that I wanted to point out from Unit 5, Chapter 8, and I'll talk to you again soon.